Welcome. It's Danusia Malina-Derben here. Entrepreneur, founder, podcaster and writer of The Parents Who Think Substack and books. You can find in all the usual places. I'm also mum to 10 brilliant souls. Today I'm chatting with Anna Pawlowicz, CEO of Humankind. Instead of me reading out a bio, it's much better if she introduces herself. Here she is.
Hi, my name is Anna and I'm originally Polish. I come from a tiny town in the Polish mountains, which I roamed around for the first 18 years of my life. And although I studied English at university, through a number of different coincidences, my life led me to the corporate world in London, where I lived and worked for about 10 years. Through another set of events, including meeting and marrying my Portuguese husband, we've now landed in the beautiful Copenhagen in Denmark, where we're raising our 2 boys, Tommy, who's 8, and Matthias, who's just about to turn 4. The birth of Matthias specifically catapulted us into the world of disability, as he has a rare genetic disorder causing mobility issues, as well as autism. So from a mothering perspective, I am now on a rather special parenting journey, trying to juggle the medical complexity of our younger son, as well as his joyfulness, the hurricane-like character of our older son, as well as my own work and just generally life. Although frankly, there isn't that much time that I have to focus on any sophisticated hobbies. So yet here I am, trying to make it all work somehow.
Anna, as a parent who thinks, you have a dilemma, don't you? What is it you're grappling with?
I'm grappling with the fact that parents like me, or you, or countless other parents out there in the world, regardless of the country they live in, are very often not seen when they are in caregiving roles. And the dilemma is kind of strengthened for me by the fact that caregiving is actually something that most of us will either need to be on the receiving end of at some point in our lives, or something that we will need to do, because we know, looking at numbers, that 1 in 4 people in the EU live with a disability. It's actually 1 in 10 when we look at children specifically. So there are plenty of us caregivers out there that are completely unseen, completely misunderstood and ignored in our society, in our workplaces, in life. And that's something that just does not sit right with me on a very personal level, but professional level as well. And it's something that I deeply believe needs to be fixed.
Okay, we're going to come to the fixing in a minute. Let's think about the impacts of this invisibility, of this unseen kind of armies of caregivers, aren't there? Everywhere. They really are, whether it's caregivers for elderly people, whether it is for medical complexities with relatives, with children, goodness me, we could make a big list, couldn't we?
A very long list, yes. So I'm speaking from personal experience, having a disabled child, but also professional experience working with organizations that try to support caregivers. If you're in a caregiving role, you are way more prone to medical conditions like depression. You're way more prone to experiencing anxiety, sleep problems, because you're under tremendous amounts of pressure that you previously perhaps didn't need to deal with, while maintaining this impression that you're still going about your life, going to work, earning money, socializing with friends if that's possible. And I think the health aspects of caregiving are not treated with the seriousness they deserve.
Full transparency. I'm a caregiver to disabled, complex needs children. And even though I wanted to wade in on what Anna just said about being way more likely to be suffering from sleep issues, mental health problems, and isolation, I wanted to hear her thinking on this. I asked her to say more.
So if we imagine, for instance, new mothers are taken care of after they give birth, there is special screening in terms of their physical health, in terms of their mental health. There's special screening for postpartum depression. There are mechanisms there to support new mothers. Caregivers go under levels of stress, especially if there are any acute situations like your child perhaps nearly dying, because unfortunately these things happen, right? your child nearly dies or has some kind of very serious emergency that ends up with you being in the hospital with the child, let's say for 3 weeks at a time, the level of stress you go through is so huge, but there is actually nothing in place, or at least nothing that I've heard of, that would recognize this very special situation that a caregiver is in to ease that pressure, to support them, to talk through the issues they may be experiencing, and to recognize that this indeed is a very difficult situation. We're expected to just get on with it, while in fact, we are very often drowning. So when we look at the impact, that has impact on virtually every single area of life. It has impact on your family relations. It has impact on friendships and how you show up in your friendships, and the kind of dynamic that now has changed because you're very often in desperate need of support as opposed to being able to help someone else. It has impact on your work relationships as well, your ability to continue working and showing up for your team, for your professional life.
So it literally impacts every area of the caregiver's life. And I'm wondering whether you think that this ignoring of the extraordinary impact that caregiving has on somebody's life, do you think it's because we devalue care?
Absolutely. So I think in most places in the world, we are in the midst of a caregiving crisis. Caregivers are not paid enough. The caregiving jobs are not really desirable or not made to be desirable. They are not paid well. They are not respected. It's like, unless you're deeply in this caregiving space or unless you yourself are disabled, I feel that the language about it and the attention to it is not really there at all, which is very illogical for me to see that, because every single one of us will either need care or be in a caregiving role at some point in our life. It's just a fact of life.
Anna lives in Denmark, and Nordic countries have a global reputation for providing excellent welfare services. I wanted to hear her speak on this.
Here in Denmark, where we live, it definitely works in a nice way, I would say, for many families, but it's still not optimal. And bearing in mind the fact that the society is aging, and I'm talking globally here, right? We live for much longer. We have such advances in medicine that allow people to live with many different conditions that perhaps otherwise would be terminal in the past. The concept of disability, and I'm saying this in the most neutral way, right? The concept of disability is not something that is going to go away. If anything, we will actually see more and more people who take disability, neurodiversity, whatever it may be, as part of their identity. In fact, I see that a lot in my work when I speak to young professionals who are just entering the labor market and saying, well, this is me with my disability. This is the accommodation that I need to make me shine and do very well at work. And you have to embrace it. So I feel like there is an identity shift that comes with conditions that people may be living with. And I don't think that we as society, we are prepared for that shift yet, and we don't have the language to speak about it. And it concerns both people with particular conditions that may need care to an extent, and also the caregivers themselves, right?
What's the fix then, Anna? How would you fix this?
This is a tricky one, right? So firstly, I would link back to the medical side of things and the health of caregivers. I believe there should be more screening of caregivers that is specific to the role they play in their families, and that allows for them to access psychological care, any kind of physical health care that they very often desperately need, really. So I think the medical side of things is the most important part, because our bodies and minds are often the first ones to go when we bend under the pressure.
Yes.
I feel naturally that when it comes to care economy and the caregiving crisis, obviously there's a massive role that governments should play to improve the situation, both for families needing caregiving, but also for caregivers.
Government support for caregivers is a huge area we may return to in another episode. I asked Anna about the role of workplaces.
It's important to look at workplaces. And I see the larger the organization is, the more capacity they have to take on this subject. I think I've seen some statistics saying that around 73% of employees are in caregiving roles in any given organization.
Again, this is caregiving not only to our children, but also other family members or spouses. And if it's 73% of our employees, obviously something needs to be put in place to care for them, right? Because they have the pressures outside of work that other employees might not simply be having. And those pressures do not go away. They probably stay there for years and years and years on end.
Just a moment. 73% of employees are caregivers. That's way more than I expected.
So from a workplace perspective, there is so much that can be done to support caregivers, from the reward and benefits side of things, managing team dynamics, educating everyone about what caregivers face in life and how it may affect their work and present at work as well. Flexibility in the way work is done and in when work is done as well is very important, right? Because we struggle with medical appointments, lots of different kinds of admin tasks that we need to complete to make sure that we have the support that we need. So flexibility is certainly something that is of huge impact. I think the one most important thing that people who may not be in caregiving roles, in my opinion, should do is just observe and notice and speak up for caregivers. If you're at work and you see that your colleague who happens to have a child with severe autism who hasn't slept for however many nights, right? If you see that colleague and you know their situation and you see that they are struggling and they are simply exhausted, just speak up. Give them a cup of tea, take them for a walk for a minute, and speak up to your organization to say, we see that some people are struggling. What is this organization doing to help them? This is just a short list from many different areas, but the question is whether our governments, our society, our workplaces actually start looking into that with the attention that it deserves.
The central question for me is why the government would do this when the unpaid labour of caregivers is the glue of society.
Absolutely, yes.
There is just very little that is coming from governmental support, this charitable support, but even those are under severe strain because funding's been cut. And so it all keeps coming back to money. When I look at the situation here in the UK, it's all about a lack of understanding or value of care.
Ultimately, even if we look at caregiving for disabled children or children with medical complexity, the child who may be experiencing these challenges is only as healthy as the caregiver parent, right? And the society overall, I strongly believe, is only as healthy as caregivers, because ultimately most societies do not have the mechanisms in place to provide care from within the system.
Let's soak those points in. Children are only as healthy as caregiver support. And society is only as healthy as caregivers. This deserves careful thought. Here she is, closing with another nugget.
So that pressure, that burden is put on nearest family members very often. And it's very important for me to say as well that the children are not the burden. The lack of systems that support caregivers is what creates that burden. So it's a very interesting dynamic that I don't think any government really fixed or found a way of managing in a sustainable way.
This is why I was so keen to have you on as my guest, Anna, because it's a fundamental conversation that you're bringing to us to consider. And I'm really grateful.
Thank you. We need willingness and space to actually discuss that and to voice some of the fears and some of the discomfort that we have around this. So thank you for creating that space.
Are you a caregiver or interested in this topic and others like it? If so, join the PWT community. Pop Parents Who Think Substack into a search engine and you'll find us. Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, keep thinking. Until next time, take care of yourselves.